everyone, welcome to the Book Station. I'm Sanjana and thank you so much for clicking on this video. Today I'm talking about some of my most favorite Indian books in English that I have read so far. This is not at all an exhaustive list. There are so many more Indian books that I have not read and other people have read but are not popular enough. But in this video, I'm talking about 9 books that are my most favorite because I keep thinking about them and I want to reread them and I keep going back to their pages again and again. Some of these books are truly popular on Bookstagram and BookTube here, but some other books in this list are not at all talked about. So I thought, why not start a conversation here and urge you to read these books. Let's get started, shall we? So the first book that I want to talk about is Punnachi by Perumal Murugan. Punnachi, both the character and the book, is very close to my heart because I loved this book. If I had to suggest one book to a beginner in reading, I would suggest this book because Punnachi is about this adorable black goat which is a gift from a mysterious man to this old person, and this old person is smitten by this very small goat whose color is not very popular. So he takes Punnachi home and he, along with his wife, the old woman, both of whom are unnamed throughout the novel, start taking care of Punnachi. Punnachi initially is very frail because she is the last of the litter and is quite weak. So the old woman tries, the mother goat in her own house urges her to feed Punnachi, but she refuses. And Punnachi faces so many struggles on the way of becoming an adult goat, but she strives and holds on to dear life. Through this journey, Perumal Murugan takes us through several emotions and several behaviors, both of humans and animals. Punnachi altogether is a political novel, I would say, because it has a lot of political commentary, especially about government, about human beings as a race, as the species that is supposed to take care of animals, but how we as humans abuse this power or this privilege that we have and end up hurting Punnachi at the end. And the best thing about this novel is the ending, especially of Punnachi, and how Perumal Murugan has woven the folklore of Tamil Nadu into the story of this beautiful black goat and given a great message through this book is very precious and something that everyone should experience by reading Punnachi. The second book that I want to talk about is an author that I love reading and I suggest to anyone. She is one of the most famous women writers today, that is Jhumpa Lahiri, and her book Interpreter of Maladies. I would suggest, if you haven't read Jhumpa Lahiri, you start off with Interpreter of Maladies because of how beautifully it's written and how diverse yet unifying it is. So Interpreter of Maladies is a collection of several short stories, I think 8 or 9, and all of them have the same thread of the theme of alienation and how people who have moved from India to America or abroad are alienated and try to find their own identity in this new nation. Her stories explore loneliness and alienation in a foreign land and alienation within your own household because of lack of communication and a disruption in the way you perceive yourself and lacking the abilities to be able to adjust to a new environment. And all these themes bring out so many of human emotions that all of these stories will keep you gripped and make you go, I know this person, or I felt that way, even though you are not in a foreign land. Because Jhumpa Lahiri uses such emotive words as well as themes that will make you connect with the characters and remember the entire book and the feelings altogether. So Interpreter of Maladies is a must read. The third book that I want to talk about is The Palace of Illusions by Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni, who is again one of my most favorite writers. Let me read what's on the back of the book. First published in 2008, Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni's The Palace of Illusions has received wide acclaim for giving a woman's take on the timeless tale that is the Mahabharata. Narrated by Panchali, wife of the 5 Pandava brothers, the novel traces her life from fiery birth and lonely childhood, where her beloved brother is her only true companion, through her complicated friendship with the enigmatic Krishna, to marriage, motherhood, and her secret attraction to the mysterious man who is her husband's most dangerous enemy. This 10th anniversary edition, complete with a new author's note, celebrates once again a remarkable and deeply human story about a woman born in a man's world. One of my most favorite books, again, especially it's impossible to get or hit the right note when you are writing his story, history from a woman's perspective. But Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni does a great job, because in this book we not just explore characters of Mahabharata, especially the major ones, through Draupadi's perspective, but we also realize how grey the characters are. Because usually when we are told, or if you've read about Mahabharata, a majority of the narrative speaks about how each of the characters are either black or white, right or wrong. But through this book, we realize how each of the characters have their own flaws and are different shades of grey. And that is all what being human is about. And in this book, she uses magic realism or magical realism to bring out some of the most mysterious and amazing events that happen as explored in the epic. And that is my favorite part, because I do not enjoy reading magic realism except when it's written by Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni. So this is a must read. Now the next book is also by Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni, but that is Sister of My Heart. And this book is close to my heart. It'll forever be close to my heart, not just because of the beautiful writing, but because of Anju and Sudha, two sisters who are born on the same night and lose their fathers on the same night. But they are not biological sisters. Both of them are born in the same household to two different parents, but these girls grow up closer than siblings. And the best part is Anju and Sudha are more like yin and yang. They have two absolutely different characters. Anju is more driven towards learning and studies, her favorite author being Virginia Woolf. She wants to escape the world that she's born into. She wants to escape the city of Kolkata, go abroad and do her own thing. But Sudha, on the other hand, who's considered more beautiful, like the stereotypical way of beauty, is more driven towards mythical stories, and she is not really as studious as Anju, but Sudha is more about loving Anju and making Anju's life more beautiful and comfortable. And these girls grow up together, and we go on an adventure of them growing up in a matriarchal household. Like I said, they lose both their fathers, and there is no other man in the house, and it's their mothers and Pishi, their old grandma, their aunt, who brings them up with stories of myths and folklore and all of that. And this is a coming of age story of two girls who grow up together, but the events, the mysterious events that led to their death of their fathers, tries to break their bond. And the bond and the fight that these two girls go through throughout the book is something that will stay with you forever and touch your heart and tell you more about what a matriarchal household can look like. Because there is an idea that a matriarchal household can only have a certain set of rules, but in this book, Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni gives us an insight into the different shades of matriarchal characters that both inspire and impact Anju and Sudha, and hence I think it's a must read. The next book that I want to talk about was first written in Bengali and then was translated to English. It is After Kurukshetra by Mahashweta Devi. And this book is also about the epic Mahabharata, but it is very different. Like we know, Mahabharata, the epic, most of it deals with the major characters. But Mahashweta Devi in this book explores the other characters. And by other, I mean the characters in the periphery who were impacted by the Mahabharata war, but they did not contribute for the causes of it. And After Kurukshetra is a set of 3 short stories, more like a play, and it is very short, but it is so impactful because it talks about how people in the periphery are usually victimized, but always or most of the time remain strong. It talks about the Nishadan women's, yes, the Nishat tribe, the women of which sacrificed their own lives for the Pandavas. It also talks about the other women who became dasis in the court of Pandavas because they could not return home because the ground was so hot due to the bodies that were burnt after the Mahabharata. And it also talks about the son that Dhritarashtra has through a Vaishya woman. But this son is never given the identity of being the legit heir of Dhritarashtra just because he was not from the same caste or community that Dhritarashtra is. And it is heartbreaking to read these stories because they are truly eye-openers of how big events affect or gravely impact the lives of people who have very little alone. And Mahashweta Devi is most famous for talking about the subalterns and about people in the periphery. And if you are looking for a different perspective to understand the epic, this book is a must. The next book that I want to talk about is Tughlaq by Girish Karnar. So this was first written in Kannada and then translated to English. Let me just read what's on the back here first. Tughlaq deals with the reign of the 14th century ruler of Delhi, Muhammad bin Tughlaq, who is acknowledged as one of the most brilliant rulers in Indian history and one of its most spectacular failures as well. It goes on explaining what's in the book. This is a drama and it's very short, but it explores so many themes. It's a political allegory and it talks about how a great ruler with great ambitions failed because of his own shortcomings and was probably a little over ambitious and also short-sighted to the reality that was around him. One of the reasons being he was surrounded by people who betrayed him, and this book explores the psychological effects of that betrayal and how Muhammad bin Tughlaq's psyche functioned. And it's brilliant how Karnar has explored this part of a strong ruler who was so ambitious but failed towards the end. And this is one of the most, I would say, true to reality books because it's impossible not to say you can't understand it. Though he was a great ruler and he had great power, there are so many emotions that he goes through and trauma that he goes through that is relatable to us as human beings. So this is one well-written play that one must read if you love reading, at least if you love reading political fiction books. The next book that I want to talk about is another favorite of mine, and this author always writes so beautifully and writes about some of the most important things, but this book is my most favorite. That is Untouchable by Mulk Raj Anand. I remember I mentioned this book in the previous video that I made about on the same theme as well. But this book is so underrated and excuse me, not spoken about much. Something's wrong with my voice. Too much talking, I suppose. Anyway, so Untouchable is about Baka. Baka is a proud and attractive young man, but he is an outcast in a system that is only now slowly changing and was as cruel and debilitating as apartheid. Into his recreation of one day in the life of the sweeper and latrine cleaner, Anand pours a vitality and richness of detail that have earned him acclaims as his country's greatest revealer of the other India. This is set in the pre-independence era, and it talks about, like the blurb said, Baka, who is striving to move out of the social class that he is born into, that is as a Dalit, as a latrine cleaner, and he has no right to land, he has no right to have a job, and he rarely gets anything to eat, and he has to beg for the food that he eats. And Baka is ambitious, and just like India that is hoping to be independent from the colonial rule, he hopes that one day he is free and has his own land. But in this book, Anand explores the other side, like the book says, of the cruel part of the practice of untouchability, and it moved me to tears to live one day in the life of Baka. And it's impossible to even imagine what people who undergo this practice or are victims of this practice can experience. And I feel lately, especially, untouchability was abolished. People think it's over, but I believe that it has only changed form. It hasn't vanished. It still exists in its truest form in several parts of the country, but also today it has changed form, and people do feel targeted and are excommunicated for several reasons: their color, their creed, all of that. And it's important to read such books and talk and start a conversation around this topic so we make a better world. So I would suggest you definitely read this book. It's only less than 150 pages, so if you're planning to read a book in a day, this is the best choice. The next book that I want to talk about is from the northeast of India, that is A Terrible Matriarchy by Eastern Kaya. This book, again, I was introduced to it when I was doing my master's degree, and since then I have loved this book. I do want to reread it this year, but I'm not sure when I shall reread it. But let me read what's on the blurb here. Young Delino is 5 years old when she is sent off to live with her disciplinarian grandmother, who wants her to grow up to be a good Naga wife and mother. According to grandmother, girls don't need an education, they don't need love and affection or time to play, or even a good piece of meat with their gravy. Naturally, Delino hates her with a vengeance. This is the evocative tale of a young girl growing up in a traditional society in India's northeast, which is in the midst of tremendous change. And this book is a coming of age story of Delino, who is a very passionate girl but hates her grandmom for her discrimination and wants to escape the claws of her grandmother. And we are taken on this journey of this young girl and how she grows up to become a brave woman and a very strong individual as well. But towards the end, you also realize that the terrible matriarchy is not really a matriarchy, but patriarchy driving or running in the garb of matriarchy. And towards the end, Delino also realizes this. But what makes this book special is how Eastern Kaya gives us an insight into Naga life. She describes the world that they live in, the beautiful nature that surrounds them, the community that they grow up in, how communities come together in times of need. And also she explores some of the problems that humans create, one of them being alcoholism and how it impacts and destroys the lives around Delino. And that itself is enough for me to pick this book up because it's so relatable and so close to heart, and you get to know Delino very closely and also understand what patriarchy and matriarchy can do to lives of people. So this is a must read as well. The next book that I want to talk about is actually a play that was first performed here where I live in Bangalore. That is Dance Like a Man by Mahesh Dattani. Mahesh Dattani has another play as well, but this is my favorite because this explores the idea of gender identity. Let me read what's on the back here. Jairaj Parekh and his wife Ratna, aging Bharatanatyam dancers, are engaged in finding a substitute Mridangam player to accompany their daughter Lata at her performance at a high-profile dance festival. Lata, in the meantime, nervously awaits the meeting between her parents and Vishwas, the young man she wishes to marry. When the four meet and in the conversations and discussions that follow, the fissures in the relationship between Jairaj and Ratna begin to explode into high-strung battles which lead back to their own youth and the tragedy that lies at the heart of their discord. So Jairaj and Ratna are Bharatanatyam dancers, but this feud that we're talking about is all due to Jairaj's father, who detests that his son has taken up a woman's art, that is Bharatanatyam. So basically Bharatanatyam is considered the art of a woman, and according to Jairaj's father, it's not manly enough of him that he takes up Bharatanatyam to run the household. And Jairaj is torn between his passion for Bharatanatyam and his duty as the male of the household to fulfill the duties of being the breadwinner. And Ratna, who supports her husband initially, also turns against him because she is torn between following her passion or supporting her husband. So, this feud that the book talks about is driven by the need to stick to a gender identity, and how Jairaj's father's animosity towards his son ruins the lives of Jairaj and Ratna, and how they try to impose their dreams of being passionate dancers onto their daughter Lata. So, Dance Like a Man is again very short. It's 80 pages, 75 pages to be precise, and it can be read in one sitting. And hence, I would suggest you start off reading this if you love reading Indian books in English. So, those were the 9 books that I would suggest you read and enjoy, because all of them are brilliantly written and are close to my heart, and I'm sure you will end up loving them as well. If you do read any of these books, then do tag me on my Instagram, that is The Book Station. And if you like this video, then consider subscribing and liking this video. I've enjoyed talking about all of these 9 books, and I shall see you in the next video. Until then, do read a book and take care. Bye bye.